Good morning, boys and girls. I am back and I'm very excited to read the next chapter, which is chapter 3. We heard in chapter 1, or we met the characters of the story, a few of the main characters of this book in chapter 1. And then in chapter 2, we also heard about King X, that Anne Marie was telling us the story about King X and how all the Danish people will defend him in case he is being attacked or if war happens or happens in their country. So that being said, I am going to continue chapter 3 today. So I hope you all enjoy and have fun listening. So here is chapter 3. So let's listen carefully or attentively. Chapter 3. Where is Mrs. Hirsch? The days of September passed, one after the other, much the same. Anne Marie and Ellen walked to school together and home again, always now taking the longer way, avoiding the tall soldier and his partner. Kirsty toddled just behind them or scampered ahead, never out of their sight. The two mothers still had their coffee together in the afternoons. They began to knit mittens as the days grew slightly shorter and the first leaves began to fall from the trees. Because another winter was coming. Everyone remembered the last one. There was no fuel now for the homes and apartments in Copenhagen, and the winter nights were terribly cold, like what I feel right now. I am cold. Like the other families in their building, the Johansons had opened the old chimney and installed a little stove to use for heat when they could find coal to burn. to burn. Mama used it too sometimes for cooking because electricity was rationed now. At night, they used candles for light. Sometimes Ellen's father, a teacher, complained in frustration because he couldn't see in the dim light to correct his students' papers. Soon we will have to add number Soon we will have to add another blanket to your bed, Mama said one morning as she and Anne Marie tied, tidied the bedroom. Kirsty and I are lucky to have each other for warmth in the winter, Anne Marie said. Poor Ellen, to have no sisters. She will have to snuggle in with her mama and papa when it gets cold. Mama said, smiling. I remember when Kirsty slept between you and papa. She was supposed to stay in her crib, but in the middle of the night, she would climb out and get in with you, Anne Marie said, smoothing the pillows on the bed. Then she hesitated and glanced at her mother, fearful that she had said something wrong. She, the thing that would bring the pained look to her mother's face. The days when little Kirsty slept in Mama and Papa's room were the days when Liz and Anne Marie shared this bed. But Mama was laughing quietly. I remember too, she said. Sometimes she wet the bed in the middle of the night. I did not, Kirsty said haughtily from the bedroom doorway. I never ever did that. Mama, still laughing, knelt and kissed Kirsty on the cheek. Time to leave for school, girls, she said. She began to button Kirsty's jacket. Oh dear, she said. Look, this button has broken right in half. Anne Marie, take Kirsty with you after school to the little shop where Mrs. Hurst sells thread and buttons. See if you can buy just one to match the others on her jacket. I'll give you some kroner. Kroner, that's the money that they have in Denmark. It shouldn't cost very much. But after school, when the girls stopped at the shop, which had been there as long as Anne Marie could remember, they found it closed. There was a new padlock on the door and a sign, but the sign was in German. They couldn't read the words. I wonder if Mrs. Hirsch is sick, Anne Marie said as they walked away. I saw her Saturday, Ellen said. She was with her husband and their son. They all looked just fine. Or at least the parents looked just fine. The son always looks like a horror. She giggled. Anne Marie made a face. The Hearst family lived in the neighborhood, so they had seen the boy, Samuel, often. He was a tall teenager with thick glasses, stooped shoulders, and unruly hair. He rode a bicycle to school, leaning forward and squinting, crinkling, wrinkling his nose to nudge his glasses into place. His bicycle had wooden wheels, now that rubber tires weren't available, and it creaked and clattered on the street. I think the Hershes all went on a vacation to the seashore, Kirsty announced. And I suppose they took a big basket of pink frosted cupcakes with them, Anne Marie said sarcastically to her sister. Yes, I suppose they did, Kirsty replied. Anne Marie and Ellen exchanged looks that meant Kirsty is so dumb. No one in Copenhagen had taken a vacation at the seashore since the war began. There were no pink frosted cakes. There hadn't been for months. Still, Anne Marie thought, looking back at the shop before they turned the corner, where was Miss Hirsch? The Hirsch family had gone somewhere. Why else would they close the shop? Mama was troubled when she heard the news. Are you sure? She asked several times. We can find another button someplace, and Marie reassured her, or we can take one from the bottom of the jacket and move it up. It won't show very much, which I sometimes do. But it didn't seem to be the jacket that worried Mama. Are you sure the sign was in German? She asked. Maybe you didn't look carefully. Mama, it had a swastika on it. Her mother turned away with a distracted look. Anne Marie, watch your sister for a few moments and began to peel the potatoes for dinner. I'll be right back. Where are you going? Anne Marie asked her mother, started for the door. I want to talk to Mrs. Rosen. Puzzled, Anne Marie watched her mother leave the apartment. She went to the kitchen and opened the door to the cupboard where the potatoes were kept. Every night, now it seemed, they had potatoes for dinner and very little else. Anne Marie was almost asleep when there was a light knock on the bedroom door. Candlelight appeared as the door opened and her mother stepped in. Are you asleep, Anne Marie? No, why? Is there something wrong? Nothing's wrong, but I'd like you to get up and come out to the living room. Peter's here. Papa and I want to talk to you. Anne Marie jumped out of bed and Kirsty grunted in her sleep. Peter! She hadn't seen him in a long time. There was something frightening about his being here at night. Copenhagen had a curfew, and no citizens were allowed out after 8 o'clock. It was very dangerous, she knew, for Peter to visit at this time. But she was delighted that he was there, or that he was here. Though his visits were always hurried, they almost seemed secret somehow, in a way she couldn't quite put her finger on. Still, it was a treat to see Peter. It brought back memories of happier times, and her parents loved Peter too. They said he was like a son. Barefoot, she ran to the living room and into Peter's arms. He grinned, kissed her cheek, and ruffled her long hair. You've grown taller since I last saw you, he told her. You are all legs. Anne Marie laughed. I won the girls' foot race last Friday at school, she told him proudly. Where have you been? We've missed you. My work takes me all over, Peter explained. Look, I brought you something. One for Kirsty too. He reached into his pocket and handed her two seashells. Anne Marie put the smaller one on the table to save it for her sister. She held the other in her hands, turning it in the light, looking at the ridge, pearly surface. It was so like Peter to bring just it was so like Peter to bring just the right gift. For your mama and papa, I brought something more practical. Two bottles of beer. Mama and Papa smiled and raised their glasses. Papa took a sip and wiped the foam up from his upper lip. Then his face became more serious. Anne Marie, he said, Peter tells us that the Germans have issued orders closing many stores run by Jews. Jews? Anne Marie repeated. Is Mrs. Hirsch Jewish? Is that why the button shop is closed? Why have they done that? Peter leaned forward. It is their way to torment. It is their way of tormenting. For some reason, they want to torment Jewish people. It has happened in other countries too. They have taken their time here, have let us relax a little, but it seems to be starting. But why the button shop? What harm is a button shop? Mrs. Hirsch is such a nice lady. Even Samuel, he's a dope, but he would never harm anyone. How could he? He can even see with his thick glasses. Then Amory thought of something else. If they can't sell their buns, how can they earn a living? Friends will take care of them, Mama said gently. That's what friends for. Anne Marie nodded. Mama was right, of course. Friends and neighbors would go to the home of the Hirsch family, would take them fish and potatoes and bread and herbs for making tea. Maybe Peter would even take them a beer. They would be comfortable until their shop was allowed to open again. Then suddenly, hush, okay, okay, I'm sorry, guys. Then suddenly, she sat upright, her eyes wide open. Mama, she said, Papa, the Rosens are Jewish too. Her parents nodded, their faces serious and drawn. I called to talk Sophie's Rosen this afternoon after you told me about the button shop. Mama said she knows what is happening, but she doesn't even think that it will affect them. Anne Marie thought and understood. She relaxed. Mrs. Rosen doesn't have a shop. He's a teacher. They can close the whole school. She looked at Peter with a question in her eyes. Can they? I think the Rosens will be all right, he said. But you keep an eye on your friend Ellen and stay away from the soldiers. Your mother told me about what happened in Osterbrigade. Anne Marie shrugged. She almost forgotten the incident. It was nothing. They were only bored and looking for someone to talk to, I think. She turned to her father. Papa, do you remember what you heard the boy say to the soldier? That all of Denmark would be the king's bodyguard? Her father smiled. I have never forgotten it, he said. Well, Anne Marie said slowly, now I think that of all Denmark must be the bodyguard for the Jews as well. So we shall be, Papa replied. Peter stood. I must go, he said. And you, Longlegs? It is away past your bedtime now. He hugged Anne Marie again. Later, once more in her bed, beside the warm cocoon of her sister, Anne Marie remembered how her father had said 3 years before that he would die to protect the king, that her mother would too. And Anne Marie, 7 years old, had announced proudly that she also would. Now she was 10, with long legs and no more silly dreams of pink frosted cupcakes. And now she and all the Danes were to be the bodyguard for Ellen and Ellen's parents and of all the Denmark's Jews. She would die to protect them, truly. Would she die to protect them, truly? Anne Marie was honest enough to admit there is there in the darkness to herself that she wasn't sure. For a moment she felt frightened, but she pulled the blanket up higher around her neck and relaxed. It was all imaginary. Anyway, not real. It was only in the fairy tales that people were called upon to be so brave, to die for one another. Not in real life Denmark. Oh, there were the soldiers. That was true. And the courageous resistance leaders who sometimes lost their lives. That was true too. But ordinary people like the Rosens and the Johansons, and Marie admitted to herself, snuggling in the quiet dark, in the quiet dark, that she was glad to be an ordinary person who would never be called upon for courage. Hmm, I'm not sure about that. We shall see what happens in the next few chapters. So, guys, I will stop here for now and I will continue chapter 4 tomorrow. We'll talk about chapter 3 before we start listening chapter 4